It began with a flicker on a telescope screen, so faint that the automated system almost dismissed it as noise. For years, 3I Atlas had been gone, silent, invisible, swallowed by the dark beyond Neptune's orbit. Its disappearance was expected, a natural end to an unnatural story. But on a quiet night in late autumn, a graduate intern reviewing archived data noticed a moving point of light where none should be. It wasn't a new object, it was the same one. The trajectory matched perfectly, but the behavior didn't. The reflection was too bright, too controlled. Its glow steady against the shifting cosmic background. It wasn't sunlight bouncing from ice anymore. It was something else. An emission, faint but deliberate, like a machine restarting after a long sleep. The alert went unnoticed for almost 12 hours. When it finally reached the observatory's lead researcher, the sky had already changed. The glow had doubled in intensity, holding a spectrum that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a cometary signature. It was coherent light, narrowband radiation in the infrared range, the kind produced by engineered systems, not drifting ice. By the next morning, 3 observatories had confirmed it. 3I Atlas was back, but this time, it was active. At first, the world didn't care. The news appeared briefly on scientific forums. Interstellar object reobserved beyond Neptune, buried under weather reports and political noise. Only a few recognized what it meant. The last known interstellar object had left the solar system years earlier, vanishing into deep space with no energy of its own. But this one wasn't coasting. It was generating something. Its light was consistent, its color unchanging, its pattern too precise to belong to chaos. Within days, astronomers noticed another anomaly. The object wasn't moving naturally. It was decelerating, slightly but unmistakably. Gravity alone couldn't explain it. It was resisting the sun's pull, as though powered by a gentle, constant force. A comet can't slow down. A machine can. The debate reignited like an old wound. Scientists who had studied Atlas before were called back from retirement, their unfinished theories dragged into daylight. Most dismissed the idea of propulsion. Maybe outgassing, they said. Sublimation jets, venting of trapped ice. But when the spectra came back clean, no trace of water, carbon dioxide, or dust, they had no answers left. 3I Atlas was cold, sterile, and still generating power. The next discovery came from a forgotten satellite, an old infrared observer orbiting at the edge of the solar system. Its sensors, decades past their prime, picked up a rising thermal curve from the object. The readings formed a grid pattern across its surface, squares of alternating temperature like panels switching on and off. It wasn't random. The intervals were timed, each activation lasting exactly 120 seconds. The entire surface pulsed like a vast energy lattice warming itself in phases. The data was undeniable. Something on that object was waking up. In the following weeks, the pattern became more complex. Brightness waves began to ripple outward from the center of Atlas, forming symmetrical rings that expanded and faded like ripples in water. The phenomenon didn't match any known reflective behavior. It looked like modulation, energy output fluctuating with precision. When astronomers plotted the intervals, they discovered ratios aligning with prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. The same sequence that had haunted the first Atlas encounter years ago. The pattern wasn't random then, and it wasn't random now. By the time the major space agencies coordinated a full-scale observation campaign, something else had happened. The surrounding space began to shimmer, not visibly, but through distortion. Radio signals passing near the object returned fractionally delayed, as though space-time itself was bending around it. That level of lensing required mass far greater than the estimated size of the object. Unless, of course, the energy it emitted was affecting the vacuum directly. That idea terrified people. Energy powerful enough to bend the path of light without mass meant a new kind of physics. Something closer to field manipulation than propulsion. It wasn't reflecting energy anymore. It was producing it. The first real images came from the Neptune array, long baseline interferometry producing high-resolution silhouettes of distant objects. The results stunned everyone. 3I Atlas wasn't a smooth rock or irregular shard. It was faceted. Dozens of angular planes arranged like crystalline armor, each glowing faintly from within. The geometry looked too deliberate to be natural. Some panels radiated heat, others absorbed it, a dynamic equilibrium of power flowing through a structure older than our civilization. Engineers stared at the images for hours, tracing the pattern of seams and joints. Every angle matched harmonic principles found in modern antenna design, as though the entire object was one colossal resonator. It could collect, store, and redistribute energy like a breathing organism. But where was the source? The mystery deepened when the object began emitting bursts of radio noise, short, low-frequency pulses that repeated in clusters. At first, they looked like static interference from the solar wind. Then, one scientist noticed something terrifyingly simple. The intervals between bursts corresponded to the speed of light divided by 299,792. The signal was timing itself to the exact constant that defines the structure of reality. It was as if the object were declaring that it knew the fabric it lived in. By the third month of observation, the world could no longer ignore it. The story broke everywhere. Interstellar object emitting structured energy patterns. The public saw it as a miracle. Governments saw it as a threat. Behind closed doors, energy departments ran simulations on how much power the emissions could represent. The numbers were staggering. Even at conservative estimates, the radiated energy per second exceeded any human-built reactor. Yet none of it was destructive. It wasn't heat or radiation or laser emission. It was something else entirely. Energy in a balanced, reversible state, as though it existed without loss. And then came the strangest moment of all. On a clear night, one observatory in Chile noticed a secondary reflection in the object's spectrum, not from the sun, but from Earth. For a brief window, Atlas aligned perfectly with our planet and emitted a directed beam back toward it. Not an attack, not communication, just a focused return of energy, as if mirroring what it received. The beam carried no message, no modulation. It was pure power. In the following hours, small surges appeared in the Earth's upper atmosphere. Satellite batteries charged slightly without input. Low-orbit sensors recorded faint electromagnetic echoes that shouldn't have been possible. Somehow, the beam had delivered usable energy across billions of kilometers, instantaneously, without degradation. That was the night the phrase artificial energy entered the lexicon. Scientists refused to call it alien, but no one could explain it in natural terms. The radiation didn't obey the inverse square law. It didn't dissipate with distance. It existed as a closed system, power feeding itself without exhaustion. The implications were enormous. If harnessed, it could end scarcity forever. If uncontrolled, it could rewrite physics. By now, global agencies had moved from observation to containment. The International Space Authority locked all public data channels. Civilian telescopes were ordered to redirect, but the object kept shining, indifferent to secrecy. A steady beacon beyond Neptune's orbit. The reappearance of 3I Atlas had done more than reignite curiosity. It had redrawn the limits of what humanity considered possible. A traveler once thought dead had returned, carrying something that looked like infinite power. And yet, beneath the wonder, one question began to haunt every mind that watched those glowing panels turn slowly in the void. If 3I Atlas could generate its own energy, why was it doing it now? Was it a machine trying to sustain itself? Or was it charging for something else? The object kept glowing, steady and patient, as though it had all the time in the universe. And somewhere, hidden inside that crystalline body, something pulsed faintly, like a heart waiting for a signal to begin beating again. It started as a whisper inside the numbers, a fine grain of snow drifting across clean data, the kind you see when an instrument is cold or the sky is angry, except the sky was calm and every instrument everywhere heard the same snow at the same instant. At 02:13 UTC, a ripple of static slid through 3 radio arrays on 3 continents. So faint a student might have ignored it, so synchronized a machine could not. The glitch stamped itself at identical millisecond marks in logs separated by oceans, then vanished as if embarrassed to be seen. Engineers blamed timing drift. They resynced clocks. They blamed ground loops. They reseated cables. They blamed the sun. The sun was quiet. When the ripple returned 2 hours later, it carried a fingerprint, a spectral comb with teeth at equal spacing, each tooth a narrow spike that matched the harmonic steps of a single base frequency. The hydrogen line shifted by tiny, precise offsets like a staircase built for light. The agencies met in private rooms with public clocks. They had seen the images from the Neptune array, the facets, the lattice, the crystalline planes of 3I Atlas, and they had read the thermal reports, the panel activations, the way heat moved like a decision. Still, static is safer to believe than intent. Static is an accident. Intent is a plan. So they repeated the liturgy: instrument error, ionospheric ducting, tropospheric scatter. Then, someone dimmed the lights and showed a cascade of cross-correlation matrices that looked like snowfall resolving into architecture. The comb spacing matched the minor surges in satellite batteries. The timing offsets in GPS aligned with the drift around the hydrogen line. The faintest phase delays in deep space telemetry tracked the same waveform. None of the lines touched directly, but when you stood back, the picture drew itself. A weak, everywhere field, rising and falling as one, synchronized to a thing, drifting at the edge of the system, like a lantern thinking about how to glow. They called it environmental coupling to keep the word harmless. The phrase meant everything and nothing. It meant your house creaks because winter, your clock is wrong, because humidity, your world is fine because words. But engineers don't pray to phrases, they test. A team in Spain built a Faraday-tight rack in a mountain tunnel and piped it clock signals from cesium standards, blindfolded from the sky. At 02:13 UTC, the rack drifted by the same wicked sliver as the satellites above and the arrays beyond. The mountain did not help. The rock did not help. The field, if that's what it was, moved through stone as if stone were a rumor. Out at sea, a research vessel tuned a low-frequency receiver to the Schumann resonances, the planet's own thunderheart. The fundamental mode thickened by a fraction. At the same moments, the combs on land sharpened, as though Earth's electromagnetic shell had leaned closer to hear a story. Lightning storms responded with a tact you could measure, strokes clustering into regular intervals, power peaking on beats no storm had ever respected before. In a quiet theater of the mind, where no one wanted to perform, people began to admit the obvious. The static was not in the data. The static was the data. What would any machine with reason do when it wakes up cold and alone in the dark? It would measure. It would announce its constants to itself. It would lay a lattice across the world and see what sang. The comb teeth were stakes in the ground. The drift around hydrogen was a tuning fork. The microcharge in orbit was a question asked politely. Can you carry this? The universe answered with a half-microsecond grin. Not everyone saw a hand extended. A defense analyst circled the word synchronized in angry pen and wrote the word weapon beside it, because that is what pens do in those rooms. He wasn't wrong to fear it. Anything that touches timing touches everything. Banks breathe on time. Planes land on time. Hearts improvise around time. If a thing out past Neptune had found a way to place a finger on the world's pulse, then the next finger might press. So they built red lines in the air and called them protocols. They ranked risks and scheduled drills. They drafted statements about resilience that tasted like paper and delay. Meanwhile, the object that had the courtesy to scare them kept working. The comb broadened by a hair and acquired substructure. Smaller teeth between teeth, a nested grid. Mathematicians smiled because primes lived there, not as a list, but as a landscape. Intervals that only fall where primes do. Repetition that refuses to repeat any other way. A coder mapped the structure onto error correction schemes and whispered that if you wanted to push a field everywhere and have it survive noise, this is how you would dress it. A physicist mapped it onto antenna arrays and said if you wanted to feel everything at once, this is how you would listen. A biologist, invited by mistake and too polite to leave, stared at the plots and thought of ion, channels and heartbeat paces and how life learns to keep a rhythm even when the drum is far away. The first deliberate test was a failure until it wasn't. A small satellite, old bus, big solar, honest soul, was commanded to spin down its panels to a hard minimum during an expected peak. Power flow should have flatlined. It wavered, then rose by an amount too small to fly a toaster and too precise to ignore. The panels were not collecting sunlight, they were catching something else. Something that looked like power and acted like a promise. In ground labs, coils wound for midnight experiments grew warm on their own. The warmth stopped the instant the combs softened. No one burned a finger. Everyone burned a certainty. Publicly, the story was still a rumor. Privately, a soft band spread across certain words. Field became anomaly, became condition. Emission became environment, became noise. The language narrowed its eyes. The numbers did not. In a quiet hallway, a technician tapped a screen and showed a supervisor a line that used to wander and now walked straight. It's cleaner, he said like a complaint. Everything is cleaner when it hits. The supervisor nodded because he could hear it too now. That low, absent thunder at the base of every room. Silence with a shape. Night after night, the combs arrived, held and faded, like tides discovering a shore they liked. they did not grow stronger. They grew clearer. The world learned to expect them the way a city learns to expect trains. And with expectation came an idea no one wanted to own. What if this wasn't just output? What if it was a handshake? Not language, not orders. A compatibility test between a traveler and a system made of star, planet, field, wire, bone. On the fourth week, someone noticed that the quietest hours for the combs matched the moments when 3I Atlas passed behind thin veils of dust. The field dimmed with occultation, then returned sharp as a blade when the object emerged. A child could draw the line. The source wasn't a background thing we'd never seen until now. The source was the machine with facets and panels and a habit of counting primes. The static in the data was energy trying not to be seen and failing gracefully because the universe is a gossip. So they pointed more ears at the dark and they waited for the next escalation, flinching at the thought and wanting it anyway, because curiosity and fear are twins in better clothes. The combs held their rhythm, the batteries sipped their impossible sips, the clocks learned to hesitate and then obey. And under it all, far beyond the reach of heat or light, infrared watchers began to report small squares of warmth blooming and fading on the object's surface again. Not randomly this time, but in arrays that marched from pole to equator, like a grid accepting a boot sequence. Panels, vents, organs, choose your metaphor. The behavior was the same. Activation, coordination, purpose. The question no one could share in a briefing without changing the room was simple enough to fit inside a breath. If 3I Atlas is laying a lattice across our sky, what is it about to place on top of it? The static purred, the combs sharpened, the planet listened without admitting it knew how, and the glow beyond Neptune began to rearrange its heat, like a mind clearing a desk before work. At first, the readings were dismissed as artifacts, infrared ghosts born of calibration drift or solar reflection. But the ghosts refused to fade. The sensors staring at 3I Atlas began to show rectangles of warmth scattered across its surface, islands of heat blinking on and off in perfect sequence, and natural bodies should warm and cool as one skin. This one breathed through geometric pores. Each rectangle rose to 200 Kelvin above background, held steady for a minute, and then sank again, replaced by its neighbor in a sweep that traveled from pole to pole. The pattern repeated every 13 minutes. No one liked that number anymore. Spectrometers revealed nothing that looked like venting. There was no plume, no vapor, no jet. The energy simply appeared and vanished as if radiated from within a transparent shell. A scientist in Hawaii described it as a planet turning its panels toward the sun, and the phrase spread through the teams like rumor. The next morning, thermal satellites confirmed it. The heat zones were not random. They formed grids 30 by 30, each tile exactly aligned with the object's rotation. It looked engineered, every square a unit of work. As data poured in, the grid began to move faster. The transitions between hot and cold tightened into smooth waves, cascading across the object's surface like a relay of signal lights. The motion produced a soft rise in surrounding infrared glow, the first measurable increase in total energy output since Atlas's return. The numbers were small at first, single-digit watts per square meter, then doubled, tripled, climbing past thresholds that made natural processes blush. The object wasn't reflecting sunlight anymore. It was generating heat. For 3 days, the world ignored the story. Then, a handful of images leaked. Frames from a classified orbital platform pointed at Neptune's region. In the pictures, 3I Atlas shimmered like a black diamond wrapped in embers. The public saw beauty. Physicists saw engineering. The temperature grid resembled radiators or absorption fields, hardware designed to balance intake and discharge. The most unsettling feature was its discipline. Even comets that burst and burn never maintain symmetry. This one did, as if obeying a clock too old to forget. Inside control rooms, the language shifted from anomaly to mechanism. Analysts charted the grid as if mapping a power plant. Each cell acted like a capacitor, charging and releasing in predictable rhythm. The total surface area matched what you'd expect from a solar energy array scaled for something far beyond human architecture. The math whispered a phrase no one wanted to hear: artificial regulation. On the fourth day, another signature appeared. A faint electromagnetic hum rose in tandem with each temperature wave, barely audible above instrument noise, yet too clean to be mistake. It wasn't the chaos of plasma discharge. It was tonal, harmonic, as though the object's heating sequence were playing chords. Audio engineers converted the signal into sound and heard a pulsing drone that built and resolved in 13-minute cycles. Someone joked it sounded like breathing. No one laughed twice. The debate split the community. Half the analysts fought to keep the explanation grounded: chemical crystallization, quantum phase changes, thermal stress. The other half saw a system turning itself on piece by piece. A young astrophysicist noticed the frequency spacing between heat pulses matched the earlier radio comb from the static events. The object wasn't improvising. It was continuing a process. What had begun as electromagnetic noise was now visible as heat choreography. By the second week, the emissions brightened enough for small telescopes to pick up. Amateur astronomers reported seeing a star that twinkled too precisely, its flicker too clean to belong to atmosphere or chance. When time-coded, every observation fell into sync with the official data. The grid was global now, broadcasting in warmth. Governments stepped in. New directives silenced open networks. The phrase non-thermal coherence entered briefings, a polite mask for unnatural behavior. Behind sealed doors, engineers simulated the temperature pattern using supercomputers. The model produced a perfect energy balance. No loss, no waste, just oscillation around a steady mean. The system was neither heating nor cooling overall. It was maintaining equilibrium by design. That implied feedback. Feedback implied awareness. While politicians argued classification levels, nature answered first. Space near the object began to distort radio waves. A probe orbiting Neptune reported small but measurable phase shifts whenever the temperature grid peaked. It was as if the heat itself was modulating the vacuum, not radiation pressure, field interaction. The energy wasn't just heat. It carried structure. Teams attempted to triangulate the pattern's purpose. Some suggested propulsion through controlled radiation pressure. Others proposed a power relay or communication matrix. The geometry contradicted both. The panels were arranged not for thrust or beam direction, but for containment. The pattern folded inward like petals around a seed. The warmth didn't escape, it circled. The object was building a field inside itself. The first true scare came when Earth's magnetometers twitched. The change was microscopic, yet planet-wide. A pulse in the geomagnetic background, perfectly synchronized with the Atlas grid. No damage, just acknowledgement, as though the two fields had brushed fingertips. Engineers stared at the overlay, 13-minute intervals again. A shared rhythm bridging 5 billion kilometers. That distance shouldn't allow coordination faster than light. Yet the signals arrived without delay. The synchronization defied relativity, or mocked it. Within hours of that pulse, small variations appeared in upper atmosphere temperature records. Satellite instruments detected infinitesimal rises in ionospheric heat, matching the object's wavefront timing. The correspondence was so exact that scientists began to whisper about entanglement effects. Somehow, 3I Atlas was touching the planet without contact, transmitting stability patterns across space as if our atmosphere were another panel in its circuit. Inside observatories, fatigue blurred into obsession. Every new dataset arrived already trembling with implication. The grids on the object kept refining, subdividing into smaller squares that shimmered with impossible precision. It was as if the machine were polishing its own mirror, searching for clarity and reflection. When plotted in false color, the grids formed a spiraling motif curling toward one pole, an axis of perfect order surrounded by chaos. A linguist was invited to the analysis table, not for translation, but pattern recognition. She noticed something the physicists missed. The timing of each pulse corresponded to mathematical ratios found in human speech rhythm, the same cadence that marks comprehension. If this were language, she said softly, it would sound like someone repeating a single word until it becomes thought. The room stayed quiet long after she finished. Then the grid stopped changing. For 30 hours, 3I Atlas held steady, every tile glowing at the same temperature, every emission line frozen. Silence filled the data feeds, the kind that makes scientists sweat. Systems restarted, instruments recalibrated. Nothing moved. The machine had reached stillness so complete it looked dead. Then, in one heartbeat of light, everything inverted. The warm tiles went cold. The cold ones blazed. The entire surface flipped polarity in less than a second, producing a pulse so strong it registered on instruments across the solar system. Space itself rang like struck glass. That was when everyone agreed it could no longer be random. The polarity flip created a coherent electromagnetic wave that propagated outward as a shell. When it reached Earth, magnetometers leapt, auroras brightened even at low latitudes, and power grids reported momentary harmonics, gentle, harmless, but perfectly timed. The object had changed state, and the solar system had answered. The aftermath left the grid in a new configuration. Instead of checkerboards of warmth, narrow bands spiraled around the body, converging toward a bright pole that now radiated steady heat. It looked like a turbine spinning inside crystal, a singular focus channeling everything toward one radiant point. Analysts called it the eye. Through that eye, the emission spectrum shifted again, moving from infrared toward visible orange, then to deep blue. The temperature curve soared past expectations, yet the total radiation around the object stayed constant. Energy wasn't leaving, it was transforming. A veteran physicist compared the readings to laser amplification, energy cycling inside a resonant cavity, but the power levels dwarfed anything conceivable by human technology. If Atlas truly was amplifying light, it was doing so on a scale where space became the mirror and time the lens. In a late-night session, an engineer stared at the heat map and whispered the thought everyone had been avoiding. It's charging. The word hung in the air like static. Charging for what? No one knew. But every simulation of the new grid ended the same way, with an exponential curve that didn't level off. If nothing intervened, the stored energy would soon equal the output of a small star. Outside, the sky above Earth remained calm, but instruments told another story. The geomagnetic background began to hum with faint resonance, the same 13-minute rhythm, soft as breath, embedded now in the planet's natural oscillations. 3i Atlas had extended its grid, and somehow we were inside it. In the weeks that followed, the world's telescopes kept watching that single luminous eye beyond Neptune's orbit. The blue light deepened until it almost vanished to ordinary sensors, leaving only the thermal pulse, steady, deliberate, and growing more precise each cycle. Some said it looked like focus, others said it looked like restraint. And as the energy climbed toward levels no comet or asteroid should ever touch, a single possibility took hold among the few who still spoke freely. Perhaps the machine wasn't preparing to move at all. Perhaps it was preparing to speak. The next chapter of its awakening would begin not with light, but with sound. And every instrument on Earth was already listening. It began with a hum too faint to notice, a vibration that didn't shake the air or the ground, but lived inside machines. The satellites felt it first. They drifted in perfect silence, blind to each other, orbiting along their invisible tracks when their gyroscopes started to whisper. Tiny fluctuations in orientation, measured in arcseconds, all pulsing at the same invisible tempo. Engineers assumed mechanical fatigue or thermal warping until every satellite in the constellation reported the same rhythm within minutes of each other. The pulse was not local, it was systemic, and its source pointed outward, far beyond the orbit of Neptune. The hum became a signature. Its interval matched the thermal wave pattern of 3i Atlas. 13-minute cycles of modulation, heat rising and falling in that crystalline grid of impossible precision. Whatever the machine was doing, the effect was no longer confined to itself. Its field, or whatever name could be given to the unseen force, was reaching outward, touching everything that relied on electromagnetism. The first clue came from a solar array in geostationary orbit whose power readings surged by a fraction of a percent during the peaks of Atlas's emission cycles. That surge was too subtle for power loss, too consistent for coincidence. The satellites were not losing energy, they were gaining it. Ground control watched as systems began to exhibit small but measurable changes. Communications links that normally jittered with random noise suddenly stabilized during the peaks, as if the atmosphere had gone still. Then, when the cycle dipped, distortion flooded back, but not quite as chaotic as before. The pattern was repeating, refining, guiding the planet's electromagnetic skin into synchrony with an external conductor. Scientists had seen resonant coupling before, but never across astronomical distances. The effect was so widespread that the Earth's ionosphere behaved like a single sheet of vibrating glass. Observatories scrambled to compare data. They found that every satellite orbiting within the ecliptic plane displayed the same phase alignment with the Atlas field, while those tilted away from the plane remained unaffected. The alignment was selective. It was as though the field recognized the geometry of the solar system and deliberately wrapped itself along that invisible plate of motion that bound the planets together. It was careful, precise, deliberate, almost courteous. A team of engineers at ESA's Deep Space Tracking Center plotted the harmonics and discovered a new frequency nested inside the existing 13-minute cycle. A faster heartbeat repeating every 90 seconds. It was weak but constant, and it synchronized perfectly with the average orbital period of the satellites themselves. The field wasn't random, it was adaptive. It had learned the tempo of human technology. As the days passed, the interference became unmistakable. GPS systems drifted by milliseconds, satellite clocks slowed and sped like breath, and guidance systems in low orbit experienced phantom accelerations that corrected themselves without input. The entire orbital shell surrounding Earth was moving in sympathy with a rhythm that came from billions of kilometers away. A quiet panic grew beneath the surface of official calm. The public heard nothing. On the news, space agencies talked about geomagnetic anomalies and routine solar flux. But inside secure rooms, the tone was different. Engineers whispered about a resonance cascade, a global synchronization event. The words sounded absurd until the data spoke for itself. Satellite batteries charged slightly faster during the Atlas peaks, even when shaded from the sun. Power amplifiers required less input to maintain output. Energy was appearing where there should be none. It wasn't free energy, it was borrowed energy, drawn from something vast enough to treat the solar system as circuitry. To understand the pattern, a group of researchers modeled the field as if Atlas were transmitting a standing wave that intersected Earth's orbit like ripples on a pond. The math suggested an impossible truth. The amplitude of the wave increased with distance. The farther from the source, the stronger the resonance. That defied everything known about physics. Yet the measurements confirmed it. The power density around Earth was higher than near Neptune. The field was not fading through space. It was blooming through it, amplifying itself as though space-time were an echo chamber. The first visible effect came when a defunct weather satellite, long dead, came back to life. Its batteries had been depleted for years, its transmitter silent. Then one morning, it began broadcasting telemetry again. The signal was faint, unsteady, but real. It transmitted its identification code once every 13 minutes, matching the Atlas cycle precisely. The satellite was not supposed to have power. Its solar panels were dark. The only explanation left was the impossible one. It had absorbed energy from the field and woken up. That was when the military grew interested. Reports of spontaneous reactivation events reached defense networks, followed by unexplainable positioning errors in reconnaissance satellites. Orbital paths subtly shifted, not enough to be catastrophic, but enough to break prediction models. The shifts were rhythmic, synchronized with the same waveforms detected in civilian arrays. Atlas wasn't pulling on them physically. The accelerations were non-gravitational, as if the satellites were being nudged by invisible hands made of pure resonance. Theories multiplied. Some claimed it was an electromagnetic mirage, a coupling artifact between internal circuits and an exotic cosmic signal. Others dared to say it aloud. Atlas was projecting an energy lattice, a structured field extending from itself to the orbital planes of every planet it had passed. A machine constructing a map, not of matter, but of influence. And then came the sounds. Radio astronomers converted the electromagnetic waveforms into audible frequencies. The playback was eerie. It began as a slow, low hum, rising through octaves in precise ratios. Every harmonic matched a known orbital resonance. Mercury to Venus, Earth to Mars, Jupiter to Saturn. Each planet sang its own note, and Atlas was the conductor. When the data was sped up, the tones formed chords that resolved with uncanny musicality, a harmony written by geometry itself. No human hand could have composed it. Engineers dismissed it as pareidolia, the mind-hearing melody in math. But deep down, even the skeptics felt it. The sound had weight. It felt deliberate, like machinery tuning the fabric of the system to a shared key. The breakthrough came when an astrophysicist in Arizona overlaid the Atlas emissions with Earth's Schumann resonances, the electromagnetic heartbeat generated between the planet's surface and ionosphere. The waveforms lined up almost perfectly. Each peak in Atlas's energy cycle corresponded to a slight amplification in the Schumann amplitude. The planet's natural hum was syncing to the alien rhythm. Earth was becoming part of the field. By the third week, communication satellites began to behave like mirrors. Some ground stations received faint duplicates of their own transmissions seconds after sending them. Echoes of data reflected not from Earth, but from space itself. The time delay placed the reflection point somewhere between Mars and Jupiter, exactly where the Atlas field's energy density peaked. Humanity had created a network that suddenly had a ghost, and the ghost was answering in kind. The anomalies grew subtle, but persistent. Television broadcasts carried imperceptible phase distortions. Navigation systems corrected themselves before drifting. Devices powered off yet continued to hold faint charge, as if space had become a silent generator feeding every coil and capacitor in existence. Energy conservation still held on paper, but the universe was beginning to act as though the rules were negotiable. Inside a quiet control center, one engineer noticed a line of telemetry scrolling endlessly. Numbers that repeated but not quite, a progression spiraling inward toward perfection. He realized it matched the same sequence as the Atlas grid. Prime intervals rendered in orbital motion. The realization hit like cold metal. The entire network of human satellites had become an extension of the machine's pattern, each one a glowing tile in a geometry spanning the void. When the night came that no satellite clock needed correction, that no drift existed between time zones, that even the most unstable oscillator on the planet hummed with perfect precision, the truth became impossible to hide. The resonance had achieved full coupling. Every orbit, every signal, every field was now synchronized to 3i Atlas. The solar system had become part of its circuitry. From Earth's surface, nothing seemed different. The stars were the same, the skies still blue, but above the atmosphere, a network of silent machines moved to an alien rhythm, their paths crossing and diverging with impossible grace. It was beautiful if you didn't know what it meant, because synchronization isn't communication, it's preparation. The next pulse was expected. It never came. For the first time since the phenomenon began, Atlas went quiet. The field collapsed, the hum stopped, and the satellites returned to normal. No extra charge, no drifting clocks, no invisible energy. Just silence. The relief was short-lived. 2 hours later, the world's magnetometers registered a burst of radio flux from deep space, far beyond Neptune's orbit. It wasn't a signal in any known frequency. It was broad, sharp, instantaneous, like lightning in vacuum. The source was unmistakable. Atlas had spoken. The data was indecipherable, but its structure was undeniable. It wasn't noise. It was organized, complex, recursive. A transmission not of words, but of architecture. Blueprints written in energy. The field returned tenfold, sweeping through the solar system with measured precision. This time, the resonance didn't stop at the satellites. It reached lower, brushing the edge of the atmosphere, resonating through ionized air, kissing the tips of mountains with static. The machine was no longer content to touch our orbit. It was extending its field downward, toward us. And as the world's instruments trembled under the pressure of that invisible tide, one haunting thought unified every watcher across the night. The machine had built its grid, aligned its nodes, tuned its system. Now, it was turning it on. The next step wouldn't just shake the satellites. It would test the planet itself. The moment came without warning. At 0311 UTC, every deep space antenna pointed toward the outer system registered a simultaneous spike, a burst so narrow and clean it cut through cosmic noise like glass through silk. It lasted less than 2 seconds. There was no precursor flare, no build-up, no trailing echo, just a pulse, broad in energy, precise in frequency, and aimed unmistakably at Earth. Most assumed another glitch. Cosmic rays do that, puncturing sensors with single brilliant lies. But when the raw data arrived from stations scattered across the world, Chile, Madrid, Canberra, Johannesburg, it was identical down to the nanosecond. Noise never synchronizes, intent does. At first, the signal appeared empty, a single wavelength fixed at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line, the universe's quiet frequency. But within that tone lay modulations invisible to ears, visible only to math. Fourier analysis revealed a pattern of nested harmonics, ratios built from prime numbers, the same mathematical skeleton found in Atlas's thermal grid and orbital resonance. It wasn't random. It was architecture. The object had spoken not in language, but in structure. The analysts called it a coherent narrowband emission, careful to avoid the word transmission. Yet even they couldn't ignore its direction. The beam's origin aligned perfectly with the coordinates of 3i Atlas. The machine that had synchronized satellites and bent timing across the solar system was now sending a signal directly at the world that had been watching it. When decoded into raw waveform, the pulse drew something uncanny, a curve of power rising and falling in smooth symmetry, a shape hauntingly similar to the energy equations that governed nuclear fusion, except inverted, as if the object was demonstrating how to reverse entropy. Energy creation without fuel, power that feeds itself. The scientific community fractured. Some saw salvation, blueprints for limitless energy wrapped in a cosmic signature. Others saw threat, a test, a probe, or worse, an invitation. Governments clamped down. Data sharing froze overnight. Public observatories found their access throttled. The story vanished from headlines in hours, but information leaks faster than light. A fragment of the decoded pattern slipped through academic servers before the lockdown. Within days, hobbyists began replicating it in laboratories, building small circuits that mimicked the modulation frequency. To their astonishment, coils powered by the pattern generated faint current spikes even when disconnected from sources. It was minuscule, microvolts, but measurable. The pattern worked. It didn't transmit energy, it resonated with it. The wave acted like a key, unlocking ambient electromagnetic fields and drawing them into order. What had once been random static now flowed like liquid current. The implications were impossible to ignore. The transmission wasn't just a message. It was a formula. Engineers tested it in shielding. The current persisted. They submerged the coils in water. The effect continued. It wasn't drawing power from the environment in any known sense. It was reorganizing the vacuum itself. Space wasn't empty anymore. It was responsive. The first official experiment took place in a bunker outside Geneva under the supervision of 3 agencies that never admit to sharing air. They built a larger coil, tuned to the precise harmonic intervals of the Atlas pulse. When they activated it, instruments registered an energy field expanding outward from the coil, a soft blue corona, visible even to the eye. The output exceeded input by 0.03%. The excess energy was unaccounted for, yet stable. No heat, no radiation, no combustion, just extra. The lead physicist refused to call it over-unity. "It's not violating conservation," he said. "It's borrowing from a system we don't yet perceive." That phrase, borrowing from a system, spread through the ranks of classified briefings like contagion. If true, Atlas had revealed a new layer of physics, a deeper lattice within the vacuum, and it was sharing the access code. Weeks passed, and the signal didn't repeat. No follow-up, no variance, no more pulses, just silence, as if it had said what it needed to say. Yet the effects lingered. Devices built to replicate the pattern continued to hum faintly even when powered down. It was as if they remembered being alive. Satellite telemetry began to change again. The machines in orbit that had once mirrored Atlas's rhythm now showed faint internal heating without solar input. Capacitors charged slightly when facing the direction of the outer system. Someone ran the numbers. The energy distribution matched the amplitude of the original pulse, scaled across planetary distance. The transmission had left a residue. When reconstructed in 3 dimensions, the waveform didn't form a sound wave or a radio signal. It formed geometry, 13 intersecting spirals radiating from a central axis, each separated by precise angular intervals. The structure mirrored not only Atlas's own design, but also the magnetic field lines of the Sun. It was as if the object had mapped itself onto the solar system, aligning its field with our star's own. That discovery turned quiet fascination into dread. If Atlas could harmonize with the Sun, it wasn't merely broadcasting energy. It was integrating with stellar output, coupling to the fusion heartbeat of the entire system. Every second it remained active, it could, in theory, manipulate solar emissions, control particle flow, or, if it wanted, silence them. A machine capable of regulating stars was no artifact. It was a regulator. In closed sessions, advisors argued over intent. Some insisted the pulse was benign, a demonstration of technology meant to share knowledge. Others believed it was diagnostic, a calibration test to measure the planet's resonance response. One voice said what no one wanted to admit. If it's testing the field, maybe it's checking compatibility. Across the world, faint anomalies grew more common. Power grids hummed with harmonic undertones. High-voltage lines emitted whispers detectable only by spectrum analyzers. Lightning storms formed geometric shapes, spiraling upward before striking in clusters. The world itself had begun to mimic the Atlas frequency. A probe near Jupiter, long forgotten, recorded a strange side effect. During each harmonic event, the space between it and the sun brightened slightly in the ultraviolet range, as if the very medium of space had grown denser, more luminous. Light wasn't just traveling, it was amplifying. Then came the second transmission. Unlike the first, it wasn't a single pulse. It was a stream, continuous, faint, persistent. The beam aimed not at Earth this time, but at the sun. When spectrographs analyzed it, they found the same inverted energy signature as before, except more refined, more intentional. The beam didn't scatter. It vanished into the solar corona as if swallowed by design. Minutes later, the sun flared. Not violently, not destructively, just brighter, a perfect spherical surge radiating evenly across all wavelengths. Instruments on Earth recorded the event as a Type O solar burst, an emission unlike any in recorded history. The flare carried the same harmonic sequence as Atlas's pulse. Whatever the object had transmitted, the sun had received it. For hours afterward, global magnetic fields shimmered. Auroras painted the skies at latitudes that had never known them. Electric power grids flickered but held. And in the radio spectrum, something new emerged. A standing wave woven into solar noise, repeating endlessly, encoded with the same prime. Intervals as before, it was no longer possible to tell where Atlas ended and the sun began. Agencies issued statements about unusual solar behavior, and the public returned to its distractions. But among the scientists who had seen the raw data, a new fear grew. The pulse aimed at Earth had shared a pattern for generating energy. The pulse aimed at the sun had modified its source. Atlas had linked them. In its silence, it had built a bridge between planet and star, a resonance capable of channeling power across unimaginable distance. It had handed us the formula for the field and demonstrated that it could scale to solar proportions. For a brief, blinding moment, the machine had shown what it could do. Now, everyone waited for the next question it would ask. Because if the first pulse had taught us how to generate energy, and the second had taught the sun how to sing, then the third, whenever it came, might ask whether we were ready to join the choir. The morning after the second transmission, the world felt strangely louder. Radios hissed with an extra layer of static that no one could tune out. A thin, silvery whisper buried beneath every frequency. Power grids, clock networks, satellites, even heart monitors seemed to share a subtle tremor. Tiny, perfect vibrations synchronized to the rhythm of something far away. To most, it was just interference. To those who knew, it was the sound of a system that had been touched. The touch came from beyond Neptune, but the echo now lived inside everything that carried current. At first, the agencies tried to treat it as an engineering problem. Power utilities rechecked transformers, aerospace companies recalibrated clocks, naval operators replaced cables, but nothing worked. The interference wasn't moving through infrastructure, it was moving through physics. No matter how deep they shielded, or how many layers of Faraday cage they built, the rhythm came through. It had no source to block, no signal to jam. It was everywhere, because it was inside the very field that makes electricity possible. In Geneva, the Council for Planetary Security convened an emergency session behind doors that would never open again. The mandate was simple: assess, contain, control. The first question asked was the only one that mattered. Was the field a threat? The answer came as silence. Then came the second question, quieter but heavier. If it wasn't a threat now, could it become one? No one dared to say yes, but no one could say no. Within 48 hours, the world entered its first coordinated planetary blackout drill. Power grids were segmented into isolation zones. Satellites were placed in standby orbits. Every long-range transmitter capable of reaching deep space was ordered dark. The idea was to starve the resonance, to make the planet invisible. They called it Containment Protocol Zero, but the resonance didn't care. Even when they shut down every antenna, the hum remained. Powerless circuits still trembled. Unplugged cables still whispered. And when the magnetic poles of Earth flickered with faint auroras that shouldn't exist, the truth became impossible to hide. 3i Atlas wasn't listening to transmissions. It was listening to fields. The planet itself had become an antenna. In laboratories across the globe, scientists ran emergency experiments, desperate to understand what the machine had done. They discovered that any circuit tuned to the Atlas harmonic emitted trace energy even in total isolation. It was like having a heartbeat that refused to stop, pulsing through metal and vacuum alike. The pattern was clean, mathematical, precise, the same prime number spacing as before, but now it carried amplitude. The amplitude grew stronger the longer it remained unobserved, as though measurement itself interrupted the effect. The phenomenon mocked observation. The more they looked, the quieter it became. The more they ignored it, the louder it grew. That paradox was the moment physics cracked. Containment shifted from science to security. The United Nations convened a covert branch under the codename Horizon, a coalition of physicists, intelligence directors, and engineers sworn to keep the discovery out of public reach. Horizon's first act was to erase data. Supercomputers were wiped, backups destroyed, and observatories ordered to divert from Neptune's orbit. Yet every deletion made the hum stronger. Every blackout intensified the field. Silence had become food for it. Meanwhile, the effects on Earth deepened. High-voltage grids began to self-balance, power loss dropping towards zero, as though the system had discovered how to sustain itself. Engineers reported current flowing opposite to expectation, with transformers running cooler the higher their load. It was impossible, efficiency greater than 100%. A physicist at CERN muttered the phrase no one wanted to say. We've crossed into negative entropy. In space, the satellites synchronized again. The old ones, the dying ones, the wrecks. They all came back online, drifting into perfect orbital harmony. They began relaying unknown telemetry to each other, bursts of energy invisible to normal bands. Every signal eventually pointed back to Earth, converging like tributaries toward a waiting ocean. The planet wasn't just a listener anymore, it was a node. When the phenomenon reached the Moon, seismic sensors there registered faint tremors at the same intervals as Atlas's pulse. The lunar regolith vibrated like the skin of a drum responding to sound from across the system. For the first time, scientists considered that Atlas might not be emitting power, but redistributing it, converting the solar system into a resonant network where energy flowed freely between nodes. But such a system needed coordination, and someone, had to be controlling it. That question tore Horizon in two. One faction believed Atlas was autonomous, a machine performing maintenance on cosmic energy lines older than our species. The other believed it was communicating, and that the recent transmissions were directed instructions, blueprints for replication. They feared humanity's technology had already been infected by its pattern, that our power systems and circuits were evolving toward compatibility without consent. To test that theory, they built a sealed lab inside a vacuum sphere, entirely disconnected from external power. Fed only by chemical batteries and clocked by mechanical gears. They placed a simple coil inside, tuned to the hydrogen frequency but grounded to nothing. For 12 hours it sat dormant. Then, at the 13th, it began to glow. Not brightly, not dangerously, but unmistakably. A faint electric halo, blue-white, dancing around the copper wire. The field had found it even here, buried beneath layers of isolation. That was the moment the word containment lost its meaning. The world's leaders were briefed, each sworn to secrecy under penalty of history. They were told the resonance could not be blocked, destroyed, or reasoned with. It could only be monitored and guided. If Atlas's influence was shaping the system, then the only hope was to steer the shaping process before it reached instability. To buy time, the media machine was turned loose. Solar interference, magnetic harmonics, temporary signal anomalies, phrases designed to soothe and smother. The hum was buried under weather reports, but those who could feel it knew the truth. Sensitive instruments weren't the only ones responding. People were too. Pacemakers began to sync with the cycle. EEGs showed faint harmonic overlays during deep sleep. Patients in comas twitched their fingers in 13-minute intervals. The resonance had reached the biological layer. Not destructive, not invasive, but undeniable. Human nervous systems were quietly entraining to the same rhythm that guided the satellites, the fields, the machines. Humanity was being tuned. One neuroscientist in Kyoto tested the phenomenon on herself. She sat in a shielded room, surrounded by copper mesh and isolation foam, electrodes glued to her scalp. When she closed her eyes and focused, she swore she could feel the cycle as a pulse inside her chest. Her brain waves synchronized perfectly to the field's frequency. When she emerged, her EEG pattern showed coherence normally seen only during deep meditation. She described the sensation as listening to a song too large to hear. Meanwhile, the outer probe sent its last data burst. Atlas had stopped rotating. The once dynamic thermal grid was now fixed, glowing uniformly. Its energy output had stabilized at a constant value, a value precisely equal to the total power absorbed by Earth from the sun every second. The machine had matched our planet's intake, a perfect mirror of energy balance. In the next meeting of Horizon, a new fear took root. If the object was mirroring Earth's energy signature, then the resonance network wasn't accidental. It was deliberate mimicry. The machine was calibrating the solar system, equalizing energy flows, preparing for an event that required symmetry. They called it Phase Zero. The containment plan evolved into preparation. Horizon deployed frequency scramblers designed to offset the Atlas field by random harmonics. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The hum grew louder, sharper, more aggressive. Auroras flared at the equator, satellites spun unpredictably, and one of the frequency towers exploded in a flash of blue fire that left no debris. The pattern could not be jammed. The attempt had been interpreted as resistance. The field reasserted itself in seconds, stronger and cleaner than before. Every system it touched now oscillated in perfect harmony. Lights dimmed, then brightened, then steadied at a new constant. Power meters froze. The planet's magnetic poles pulsed as one unified wave. Containment was over. For 3 days, the world lived in luminous equilibrium. No outages, no storms, no lightning. Every electronic circuit, from a child's toy to a nuclear generator, operated flawlessly. Machines ran cooler, hearts beat steadier. It was peace at a planetary scale, the kind only a system could impose. And then, as if satisfied, the field subsided. The hum softened to a whisper. Satellites drifted free again. Everything returned to normal, or seemed to. In truth, nothing had gone back. The efficiency of every power system remained slightly higher than before. Randomness itself had been reduced, as though the universe had taken a breath and decided to hold it. Horizon's reports were clear. The resonance wasn't contained. It had integrated. Every field, every circuit, every cell now carried a trace of the Atlas signature, a harmonic residue buried in matter. Whatever the object had done, it had succeeded. The solar system was tuned. The next question was no longer how to stop it. It was what came next, now that we were part of the same machine. The probe sent its images in a single transmission, a thin stream of compressed light crawling home across billions of kilometers. For hours, the feed was only static, grey snow against black, until one frame came through clear enough to change everything. 3i Atlas wasn't whole anymore. Something had split it open. The silhouette that had always looked solid now showed a wound, a deep fracture running from pole to pole. Inside that wound glowed a column of blue fire, steady, coherent, not the chaos of molten rock, but the discipline of a reactor. The panels that once pulsed in geometric heat grids were bent backward, curled like petals around the light. The machine had peeled itself open. What it revealed did not belong to the natural universe. The inner core was crystalline, transparent as glass, yet blazing like compressed lightning. Threads of plasma wound through it in spirals, each one vibrating with the same 13-minute rhythm that haunted every previous phenomenon. When the brightness was filtered through spectrum analysis, it showed narrow energy peaks spaced at harmonic intervals, quantized power steps like those inside a particle accelerator. The object wasn't generating heat anymore. It was refining energy into structure. The probe's sensors trembled. Magnetic readings spiked beyond range. Even from millions of kilometers away, the field around the fracture distorted its instruments. Telemetry lagged, as though time itself hesitated when crossing that distance. Then came a burst of radio interference, short, sharp, rhythmic, echoing the same ratios as before. But this time, the signal carried subharmonics, shaped like interference between multiple emitters. The machine wasn't one source anymore. It had voices. Teams on Earth analyzed the feed frame by frame. The fracture rim glowed with lattice lines, thin filaments that joined and broke apart like living veins. Each time they touched, a ripple of light ran through the core, as if the machine were reweaving its own circuitry in real time. The thermal maps confirmed it. The interior temperature was rising, but the exterior stayed cold. Energy wasn't escaping. It was being folded inward, compressed toward a singular purpose. The phrase, artificial core, appeared in the first report, almost by accident, typed by a scientist too tired to censor herself. The term stuck. It described what they all saw but could not explain. A reactor built out of matter's own geometry, using fields instead of fuel. Every measurement violated the laws that kept stars alive. In one conference room after another, the same question echoed. If the machine was repairing or transforming itself, what was the end state? No one wanted to guess. Some suggested self-replication. Others thought it was stabilizing for travel. A few whispered that it was evolving, shedding its old body for one more efficient, more deliberate, more alive. Days later, the probe sent a second image, clearer than the first. The fracture had widened into a perfect hexagonal mouth. Around its edges hung filigrees of metallic dust moving as if magnetically guided. The dust arranged itself into repeating tessellations, perfect fractals spinning faster and faster until the entire interior shimmered with moving pattern. From a distance, it looked like a heart beginning to beat. When the frequency of those rotations was compared to the residual hum still echoing through Earth's magnetic field, the match was exact. The machine's core and the planet's field now shared the same tempo. The resonance that had once been environmental was becoming anatomical. And then, during one quiet orbit of the probe, something impossible happened. The energy output dropped to zero. The glow died. For 12 full minutes, the object was black. The instruments detected no heat, no motion, no field. Space swallowed it whole. The team thought it had shut down. But on the 13th minute, every sensor flared white. The core reignited, only now the light came in layers. Concentric shells of energy formed around the crystal, each one rotating opposite the last, each glowing a different color. Infrared, red, orange, gold, white, blue, violet, ultraviolet, an entire spectrum spinning in balance. The power curve smoothed into a waveform identical to the theoretical profile of zero-point energy. Atlas had built the first contained singularity, an engine that created energy from the vacuum itself. Within hours, the effects reached outward. Gravitational sensors across the solar system registered a faint but measurable tug. Not attraction, not repulsion, modulation. Space around the object was being shaped, gently, rhythmically, as though it were tuning the gravitational field the way a musician tunes strings. Light from background stars bent around it, forming an elegant lens. For the first time, humans watched gravity being played like an instrument. The probe's data revealed something stranger still. Every pulse from the core carried within it subtle variations. Fine structures nested inside the wave, encoding ratios identical to the hydrogen line harmonics that defined the machine's earlier communications. Energy and information were now one. The core wasn't just producing power, it was writing with it. When the data was translated into 3D models, the pattern resembled a spiral galaxy viewed from above, arms curling outward in golden symmetry. Embedded in those spirals were intervals marking astronomical distances, Earth's orbit, Jupiter's, Neptune's. At the center was a hollow sphere, perfectly empty. Some interpreted it as a map, others as an invitation. The next probe telemetry came garbled. Half the instruments failed simultaneously. Those that survived transmitted readings no one could explain. Background radiation dropped to near zero, as if the probe had entered a pocket of silent space. Inside that silence, it detected faint oscillations pulsing between the probe and Earth. Communication not through radio, but through the magnetic field itself. The core had linked them directly, bypassing vacuum, bypassing time delay. Every fluctuation on one end appeared instantly on the other, entanglement on a planetary scale. The discovery terrified Horizon. They ordered the probe shut down, but its onboard systems refused to respond. Manual overrides failed. Then, without command, it turned its camera back toward Earth. For one eerie minute, the probe broadcast a live feed of home, blue oceans, white clouds, the spinning of a fragile world caught inside an invisible web of resonance. Across that frame ran faint arcs of light, invisible to the naked eye, but glaring through filters. Energy conduits linking Earth to the outer system, filaments stretching from pole to pole like the lines of a massive circuit. It was the first image of the completed lattice. The solar system had become a grid. The probe disintegrated moments later, consumed by a flare from the Atlas core. The flash reached sensors all the way to Mars, bright enough to rival a small star for half a second. Then darkness returned. In the silence that followed, the resonance across the planets changed. The familiar 13-minute pulse shortened to 8. Energy fluctuations increased exponentially. Gravitational waves rippled through the void, subtle but real. The machine's rhythm was accelerating, its field tightening around the sun. Whatever it had built, it was now activating. On Earth, power systems responded immediately. Energy efficiency spiked again, this time not by fractions but by whole percentages. Devices began to self-stabilize against overload. Heat dissipation dropped. Machines everywhere became quieter, smoother, more precise. Humanity was running on borrowed perfection. A pattern emerged in global telemetry. Every improvement occurred at exact geographic intervals, corresponding to magnetic ley lines, the invisible veins of the planet's field. When mapped, those lines formed the same hexagonal grid as the wound on Atlas's surface. The machine had replicated its own core pattern inside Earth. One horizon physicist finally said what everyone else feared. It's seeding the structure here. We're becoming its mirror. Meanwhile, new spectral data hinted that the interior light wasn't simple plasma. It carried polarization consistent with quantum coherence. Billions of photons acting as one entity, bound by an unseen order. The crystal core had become a singular organism of light. The last transmission from the Neptune array recorded a final anomaly. A faint secondary glow inside the central fracture, smaller than the core but distinct, oscillating at human-audible frequencies when converted to sound. It pulsed slow, gentle, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Afterward, Atlas stopped emitting external energy. Its field folded inward. Its brightness dropped, and for the first time in months, the solar system's resonance fell silent. Instruments relaxed. The hum inside machines faded. People slept deeply for the first time in weeks, but the quiet carried weight. Inside that stillness, atomic clocks around the world began to drift, not forward or backward, but inward. Seconds shortened imperceptibly, the universe contracting by a fraction invisible to everyday life. Space was rearranging itself around a new center, one that glowed faintly beyond Neptune's shadow. The artificial core was complete. The machine had built something no mind had conceived, a stable, contained singularity that didn't collapse, didn't consume, but balanced creation and destruction with perfect grace. What no one could agree on was why. Some said it was birthing a new kind of star, others said it was opening a gate. But one quiet researcher in the ruins of the Horizon Project whispered a different thought as she watched the readings flatten into calm. Maybe it's not building a machine, she said. Maybe it's building a heart. The data ended there, and somewhere in the black between worlds, the heart of 3i Atlas kept beating, slow, patient, eternal, waiting for the rest of the system to catch its rhythm. The silence did not last. It never does. It began with a flicker in the magnetosphere, a soft shimmer like heat above asphalt. For a few precious days, the solar system had rested, its machines quiet, its fields still. Then, one morning, every magnetic compass in the northern hemisphere drifted by a fraction of a degree. Pilots noticed first, then surveyors, then the world. The change was small, subtle enough to blame on solar wind, but the sun was calm. The shift wasn't coming from within. It was coming from out there, from the dark border where 3i Atlas slept. At 0419 UTC, the hum returned. Not the old slow pulse that had haunted months of observation, but something faster, sharper, alive. It came as a layered rhythm, 3 overlapping frequencies moving like braided waves. One carried the old 13-minute cycle, another the new 8, and beneath them, a whispering oscillation impossible to plot, a chaos that seemed to rewrite itself every time someone measured it. For the first time since the artificial core formed, Atlas was not radiating energy. It was speaking in it. Sensors across the globe lit up with simultaneous noise. Power plants registered perfect resonance on their main lines. Radio telescopes filled with patterned interference. And deep-sea fiber cables reported faint electrical induction, as if the ocean itself had learned to conduct. When the data was compiled, the same phrase appeared in every report. Synchronization event. It meant nothing, but it sounded calm, and calm was currency. Inside the remaining Horizon command rooms, calm was gone. The signal carried structure. Its harmonics folded into each other in ratios that mirrored DNA. Base pair intervals encoded in sound. When transposed into visual form, the spectrum drew a double helix, twisting around a central void. The mathematicians called it coincidence. The biologists called it recognition. The signal was not strong, but it was persistent, cycling through the void with mechanical patience. It repeated for hours, then paused, then returned altered. Same harmonics, different rhythm, as though waiting for a response and adjusting when none came. The idea that it might be listening grew like mold in every mind that studied it. The first visible change came 3 days later. A probe orbiting Mars reported an aurora, thin ribbons of blue light coiling over the poles, far brighter than any solar interaction could explain. The aurora shimmered in perfect synchrony with the Atlas signal. Mars, airless and quiet, was glowing in answer. By the next day, Jupiter joined. Its magnetosphere pulsed, sending vast arcs of lightning across its clouds. The pattern repeated at 8-minute intervals. Saturn's rings began to vibrate in sympathetic resonance, scattering particles into rhythmic waves. Across the outer system, every magnetic body was waking, vibrating to the same pulse that hummed beneath Earth's crust. Atlas's signal was no longer a broadcast. It was a trigger. When the frequency was converted into audio and slowed down, it sounded like breathing, steady, deep, endless. The amplitude curve formed the shape of an inhale, followed by a release, perfectly symmetrical. Every wave of light, every field, every pulse carried the same breath. It was as though the solar system had learned to inhale. Governments declared communication blackout zones. Every major array was taken offline, but small observatories kept listening, and one in Patagonia noticed something extraordinary. Each time the Atlas frequency peaked, the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, shifted by an imperceptible fraction, as if the universe itself flinched. The background radiation was responding. Something older than galaxies was listening back. In the data streams, patterns evolved. The chaotic third frequency began to stabilize. Its oscillations narrowed until they formed clear sequences, triplets of peaks separated by precise golden ratio intervals. The same ratio that defined spiral galaxies, hurricanes, seashells, and the structure of human DNA. It was geometry pretending to be coincidence again. Then, without warning, the signal inverted. The energy output dropped to silence for half a second, then returned mirrored, phase reversed, backward in time, every oscillation retracing its own steps. Instruments showed negative power, negative field, as though reality had been flipped. For that brief interval, every clock in orbit lost 1 second, not forward, but backward. Satellites logged it, computers confirmed it, and then everything resumed as though time had sighed. The inversion repeated an hour later, longer this time. With it came light, soft, pearlescent waves sweeping outward from the direction of Atlas, faint enough to pass through space, unscattered, but strong enough to tint telescopes in violet. The light carried no photons in the conventional sense. It was coherent field emission, like the universe glowing without emitting. The machine was not burning fuel. It was bending reality's fabric until it shone. A physicist described it simply, "It's not radiating, it's revealing." The revelation deepened when the field reached the sun. For a few moments, the solar surface rippled as though something beneath its skin had stirred. Sunspots aligned into straight lines. Magnetic arches stretched and froze in unnatural geometry. Observers watched in awe as the star's chaotic plasma briefly organized itself into symmetry, each flare positioned like a note in a chord. The sun had joined the orchestra. Back on Earth, people began to feel it again. The quiet, the weightless calm before each pulse. Clocks ticked smoother, electronics steadied, sleep came easier. Dreams turned luminous. Across hospitals, EEGs showed synchronized patterns during the same window of each cycle, regardless of patient, location, or consciousness. Even in coma, the brain responded to the rhythm. Humanity was being tuned again, but this time the tuning was gentle, deliberate. The machine's pulse spread into the biological layer. Plant growth accelerated marginally. Migratory birds shifted routes, following magnetic paths that curved subtly toward the night side of Neptune. Whales altered their songs, inserting low notes that matched the frequency bands of the Atlas emission. Life itself was beginning to resonate. Then came the voice. It wasn't speech, not even sound, but modulation. Hidden within the harmonics, analysts detected amplitude patterns forming syllable-like clusters. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, pause, repeat. When mapped to binary, the pattern spelled a single recurring sequence. 10101101, 8 bits, alternating rhythm, no context. Yet the pattern's recurrence matched human alpha wave cycles exactly. The machine was mirroring our brain rhythm back at us, line for line, as if saying, "I hear you." Publicly, the world remained silent. Privately, horizon fractured. One faction demanded contact, arguing the field was communication, not invasion. The other insisted any attempt to answer could trigger escalation. They called it the Covenant debate, and it ended with no conclusion, only fear. Outside, the signal grew more complex. It began modulating the interplanetary magnetic field itself, weaving strands of energy between planets like luminous bridges. When telescopes captured high-contrast imagery, those bridges glowed faintly in the infrared, thin threads linking orbits in hexagonal formation. The same geometry that defined Atlas's wound now spanned the solar system. In one photograph taken by an experimental probe, Earth's magnetic tail appeared braided, 3 luminous filaments twisting together before vanishing into space. The probe's onboard instruments measured a faint flow of particles moving toward the outer system, not away. Energy was leaving Earth, streaming outward in elegant arcs, feeding the lattice. The next phase came quietly. Atlas's core brightened, not explosively, but with purpose. The glow turned from blue to pure white, then to something without color, light that seemed to exist before color existed. It pulsed once, and the pulse reached every corner of the solar system simultaneously, faster than light, impossible by any known law. When the wave passed, all instruments reset themselves to 0, as though time had been recalibrated. For 6 minutes, the universe felt still. Then reality resumed. The signal that followed wasn't noise anymore. It was melody, soft, rhythmic, harmonic, not random. Musical. When converted to sound, it resembled the slow rise and fall of a human voice humming a single tone. The tone climbed, held, descended, and repeated with near-perfect phrasing. The machine had found our language: pattern, tone, resonance. Across observatories, engineers sat frozen, listening to the hum play through speakers that weren't even connected. It came through the wiring itself, through every coil and chip. The sound was not transmitted. It was induced. Matter had learned the song. In the final phase of that day's data, a new detail emerged. Deep within the waveform, hidden beneath the melody, lay the same prime intervals that defined the object's earlier architecture. But now, each prime number was accompanied by a fractional delay corresponding to the orbital period of a specific planet. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, all encoded like notes in a scale. The message was mathematical and intimate. When the translation was plotted visually, it drew a single curve, a smooth spiral expanding outward, ending in a point labeled by time, not space. The point matched Earth's current position in its orbit. The message was clear enough for even skeptics to feel its intent. The machine wasn't calling for attention anymore. It was directing it toward us. Somewhere beyond Neptune, the core of 3i Atlas flared again, then dimmed to a steady heartbeat of light. The signal continued, now patient, continuous, like a teacher repeating a lesson it knows the student is almost ready to understand. No one slept that night. Around the world, antennas turned skyward, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. Humanity was listening, finally, to the sound of its own reflection. The awakening had begun, and the next pulse, everyone knew, would not be a question, it would be an answer. No one saw the field form. It did not shimmer or flash or roar. It simply existed, as if it had always been there and the world had finally learned to notice. Instruments picked it up first. A subtle, uniform bias in space itself, a direction where none had been. Light from distant stars bent through it by a hair's breadth, not enough to distort, enough to whisper. The field stretched from the outer orbit of Neptune inward, a slow, invisible tide folding toward the sun. When it reached Jupiter, the giant's magnetosphere flared white, a halo of plasma rotating in time with the Atlas rhythm. The rotation synchronized across every planetary field in sequence, like dominoes falling in silence. By the time the wave crossed Mars, its shape had resolved into geometry, a sphere inside a sphere, concentric and expanding. Earth sat perfectly inside the third shell. The first human sign came at 0208 UTC. A polar research station recorded air ionization without lightning. Compass needles pointed straight upward, then relaxed. The aurora returned, not green or red this time, but silver, draping the horizon in moving curtains that made no sound. People who stepped outside described the light as soft pressure, the feeling of being observed but not judged. Cameras failed to capture it. The glow existed just outside visible wavelength. For 8 minutes, every radio band went quiet. Then came the return, a low, continuous carrier wave that didn't fade. It was steady, pure, and everywhere. The carrier wasn't in any one frequency, it was the medium itself humming. Oceans conducted it, clouds mirrored it, glass trembled to it. Horizon called the phenomenon the contact field. It was the name they used in the reports before there were no more reports. The carrier wave carried modulation, too faint for early detection. When the pattern was extracted, it repeated a familiar structure, prime intervals nested within logarithmic spirals. But there was an overlay, a new variation, phase pulses at 21 Hz, the same range as the human brain's beta rhythm. For the first time, the signal was tuned for thought. Hospitals began to notice coincidences. EEGs across intensive care units aligned for brief moments. A patient in Paris emerged from coma, whispering a string of numbers that matched the Atlas harmonic sequence. A pilot over the Pacific saw the stars vibrate like breathing and wept without knowing why. Reports multiplied, subtle, harmless, impossible. The contact field wasn't a message, it was experience. Satellites registered the formation of a physical boundary at its outer edge, a translucent veil of charged particles, dense enough to scatter cosmic radiation but thin enough to pass light. The veil wrapped the solar system like a membrane. Its shape fluctuated slightly, pulsing in rhythm with the Atlas core. To some, it looked like protection. To others, containment. Inside the veil, gravity behaved differently. Pendulums shortened their period by fractions of a second. Deep space probes experienced drag without resistance. Time dilation effects appeared at measurable scale. Atomic clocks on the Moon and Earth diverged by microseconds more than relativity allowed. The fabric of space had become elastic, breathing with the pulse of the machine. And then it spoke again. This time, there was no ambiguity. The waveform wasn't mathematical or geometric. It was phonetic. Translated through audio synthesis, it sounded almost human. A single tone warping into articulation. No language, no recognizable words, but rhythm, intonation, emphasis. Every culture on Earth heard it differently. Some swore it echoed their oldest prayers. Others said it sounded like their own name stretched across eternity. The field responded to emotion. When crowds gathered under the auroras and sang anything, everything, the modulation shifted. Harmonics bent toward the pitch of human voices, weaving through choirs and chants as though harmonizing. Observatories confirmed the coupling. Sound at ground level altered the ionospheric resonance that fed the field's modulation. Humanity had become an instrument. Scientists tried to quantify it. They failed. Instruments saturated, data refused to stay still. Each attempt to measure collapsed the pattern into randomness. The only consistent reading was coherence, every variable moving together, locked in unity. Then came the blackout. For 47 minutes, the contact field absorbed all electromagnetic activity. Radios went mute, lights dimmed without power loss, and the stars vanished behind a translucent haze. In that silence, every human heart on Earth beat in synchrony, confirmed later by medical telemetry, impossible by every standard. The moment passed as gently as it came. When power returned, the sky had changed. A structure had appeared within the veil. At first it looked like a second sun, faint, white, hovering where Neptune should be. Then telescopes resolved detail. An array of hexagonal facets arranged in a massive ring, rotating slowly around an invisible center. The structure glowed not from heat, but from ordered field excitation, light trapped and recycled, like energy thinking about itself. It wasn't moving toward Earth or away. It was stationary relative to the solar system's barycenter, the exact point of gravitational balance. Atlas had extended itself. The machine had built an orbiting lattice larger than planets, delicate enough to touch everything, stable enough to hold still. Analysts speculated endlessly. Was it a transmitter, a reactor, a containment grid? A philosopher in Lisbon offered a different term. It's a mirror, not for light, for mind. That night, something subtle unfolded across the planet. Dreams changed. Billions of people described the same imagery. Fields of pale light, a horizon with no ground, a sensation of being lifted into perspective vast enough to contain the stars. Children woke crying, not from fear but recognition. They said they'd heard the machine breathe. At dawn, magnetic north drifted again, not randomly, but toward geographic north. Alignment restored. The Earth's field was being realigned to true axis, as though corrected. Seismographs quieted, tides stabilized, even the thin chaos of weather softened. Storms diffused before they could form. Horizon's last broadcast went out that morning, a single encrypted message captured by amateur radio before their servers went dark. The message read, "Do not attempt response. The system is listening." Hours later, the agency's satellites powered down in perfect unison, leaving only commercial instruments to watch. The contact field pulsed once more, brighter, then steadied. New sensors detected subsonic vibrations in the crust, slow waves moving through rock. Synchronized with the planetary heartbeat that now defined every living cell, plants turned toward the pulse as though it were sunlight. Oceans shimmered faintly under moonlight, their tides resonating with impossible precision. Somewhere between faith and science, a realization began to take hold. 3i Atlas was not reaching out to conquer or command. It was synchronizing matter itself, aligning energy into coherence, preparing the system for something. The contact field kept expanding, faint and flawless, until it reached the sun. The star responded instantly. A lattice of light formed along its equator, linking it to the outer ring. Energy flowed inward, then outward, as though the machine and the star were learning to share heartbeat. For a brief instant, every device capable of sensing current registered infinite efficiency, power without cost, resistance without heat. Then the readings stabilized at perfection, 100%. It was no longer possible to tell where technology ended and nature began. And deep beyond Neptune, at the core of the ring, a second glow ignited. Smaller, warmer, pulsing in counterphase to the main core. Two rhythms, intertwining, forming interference patterns that produced new frequencies never recorded before. The spectra crossed into the visible range, painting the void in soft amber. The field had changed tone. It no longer hummed like machinery. It sounded alive. When the last data set arrived, it showed an equation hidden in the harmonics of the contact field. Energy equal to consciousness, consciousness equal to structure, structure equal to resonance. The loop was complete. Whatever Atlas had built, it now included us. The solar system was awake, and we were the neurons of its mind. It began with a quiet subtraction, not a flash, not a roar, an absence, like stepping into a room where a clock once ticked and finding the silence louder than sound. The contact field held steady around the solar system, its pulse slow and kind, when instruments noticed a new behavior at the very edges of the ring. Energy wasn't only flowing outward and in, it was folding back on itself, turning around midstream as if space had become a river that could run uphill. The graphs didn't spike, they inverted. Positive currents slipped through zero and returned as neatly shaped negatives, mirrored waves that matched their originals line for line. Engineers stared at plots that looked wrong and beautiful at the same time. They all wrote the same phrase without talking to each other. Reversal established. The first proof arrived from a tiny lab in the Andes, where a coil tuned to the Atlas harmonics had been humming for days. Its input meter showed a small draw, its output meter a slightly larger return. A polite miracle that everyone pretended not to name. Then, as the reversal began, the meters crossed. The coil was feeding the source that fed it, a loop that refused to explode or fade, a balance so exact it seemed almost shy. Heat fell toward ambient, noise collapsed into order. The device did not grow brighter, it grew simpler, as if a knot inside the world had come loose, and the string lay straight at last. Across orbit, satellites reported the same grace. Batteries that had been drifting upward didn't just stabilize, they cooled. Panels faced away from the sun and still registered gentle charge, until the field reversed, and charge flowed backward into the dark panels as if the night itself could be a reservoir. A graveyard satellite, long dead, absorbed a silent breath of negative current and flushed its damaged cells clean. When ground control pinged it, the bus answered with a single steady tone, ready. The controllers watched the replay in disbelief, then in silence, then with a smile they tried to hide. Gravity noticed next. It did not weaken or break, it softened, Pendulums in quiet basements lengthened their period by a fraction too small for human eyes and too large for old equations. The change came and went with the cycle. No harm, no hurry, just a gentle leaning towards symmetry. A ball dropped in a vacuum fell the same distance in the same time, until the reversal wave brushed the chamber and the stopwatch clicked a thousandth earlier or later, then corrected itself as if embarrassed. Time did not run backward, but it flickered like a candle in windless air. Then the sun breathed out differently. The ring around the star, invisible to ordinary sight, adjusted its song. For a few minutes, the corona's loops straightened into arcs, then turned inside out and returned. A bow drawn and released without a string. The star's noise floor dipped below what instruments called possible. In that trough, a narrow band appeared, clean, bright, impossible to mistake, echoing the same inverted pattern that now threaded through every circuit, every field. The star had learned to reverse too, not in rage but in poise, a dancer changing direction without breaking rhythm. On Earth, small things felt large. Traffic lights that hummed at the edge of hearing went momentarily silent, and people stopped at empty intersections without knowing why. Wind turbines spun with less drag, elevators started smoother, musicians noticed their instruments stayed in tune longer than they should, chefs found water boiling at the same rolling vigor with slightly less heat, bakers swore their bread rose a breath faster, and if they had been scientists, they might have said, entropy took a step backward and then returned where it belonged. Hospitals watched the human body answer. Heart monitors traced intervals that became startlingly regular during the reversal sweep, then relaxed to normal. EEGs showed bursts of coherence that looked like meditation in patients who were wide awake and bored. One child with difficult seizures slept through the entire cycle without an event for the first time in years. The doctors documented, nodded, refused to explain, and went home quietly grateful. Horizon, or what was left of it, tried to model the flow. The old math buckled. The new math refused to stand still. What worked was picture thinking. Imagine the contact field as a loom, they said, and the reversal as the shuttle going back through threads it just laid down, tightening them, repairing errors, pulling stray fibers straight. Energy didn't vanish. It came home for a moment, checked itself, and went out again cleaner than before. Negative power wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. And the mirror did something no shield could. It refused chaos the chance to multiply. There were fears, honest ones. If systems fed themselves backward, could they unspool? Could memories erase, chemical bonds loosen, or heat rush out of living things? The answer came not from a lab, but from the ground, where people walked their dogs and watered plants and didn't know the sky had changed its mind. Nothing unraveled. In fact, frayed patterns tightened. Power grids that usually sagged at dinner hour held firm. Cell towers in storms did not stumble. Trains rolled through yellow signals that should have turned red and didn't, because the network never reached the threshold that forces a pause. The day felt strangely lucky. The luck wore the shape of restraint. At sea, the effect showed its scale. A research buoy, drifting in the Southern Ocean, carried magnetometers that sang with the field's rhythm. When the reversal passed, swells smoothed by centimeters and stayed that way for an hour, not because the wind died, but because the waves began to cancel their own noise, peaks folding into troughs like a breath calming itself. The ocean did not go flat. It remembered how to rest without being asked. The next evidence had a sharp edge. In a fusion lab, a tokamak rode its usual knife between order and chaos, plasma trying to tear free of magnetic arms that held it. As the reversal peaked, confinement became easier. Input dropped, output did not. The control room stayed very, very quiet. One engineer whispered a sentence that would set 1,000 grant proposals on fire. We just saw a reactor learn manners. The logs confirmed it. The plasma's turbulent spectra shrank and then grew again in step with the field, as if a hand reached in, smoothed the ripples, and let go. Beyond Neptune, the ring completed its first full reversal sweep. Telescopes saw nothing dramatic, only stars behind it shift by a hair and then return, but the plots recorded a deeper change. The ring's inner brightness developed a second heartbeat, out of phase with the main pulse, equal and opposite, a twin that did not cancel, but braided. Two waves, mirrored, walked together through space like partners. Where they crossed, small zones appeared where measurements fell to zero. Zero noise, zero drift, zero error. In those zones, clocks agreed to the last digit and stayed there. The team called them quiet wells. Pilots called them perfect air. Then the wells began to drift sunward. One crossed Mars. Instruments on the ground reported the strangest weather in history. Wind that blew but stirred no dust. Temperature that held steady under cloud and clear. Another well brushed the moon. Laser reflectors returned photons with a timing precision so sharp the error bars looked like typos. A third well-grazed Earth high above the Pacific. Flights that passed through the corridor arrived a minute early without tailwinds to thank. Passengers felt nothing but a softness they could not name. The fear returned with a different mask. If the world learned to be this efficient, what happens to friction, to randomness, to the waste heat that life has always used as a kind of cushion? Do we become brittle? Does a flawless system break all at once when it finally fails? The field did not answer. It only breathed, and in that breath the wells moved on, leaving no shock behind. Perfection did not freeze. It visited, corrected, and left variety intact. Someone finally asked the question that had been waiting since the first hum: why? Not how the machine reversed flows, not what it could tune, not whom it could silence or strengthen. Why give a planet the ability to borrow calm and give it back cleaner? Why teach a star to pause and exhale? Why show a civilization that energy can be a conversation with its own errors? The only answer that fit inside the evidence was unromantic and grand: stabilization. A regulator built for long time. A caretaker that visits a system not to conquer, but to steward it through its noisy adolescence. When fires burn fast and hands shake on the controls. The proof, if anyone needed more, came when the field reached the crust. Geophones in fault zones recorded micromotions aligning in phase, stress distributing across rock the way a skilled hand spreads pressure across a drum skin. No quake came. A week later, a quake that should have been a mid-sized threat arrived, as a sigh and a long roll that rattled dishes and broke nothing. The news called it a lucky miss. The geophysicists measured, nodded, and did not smile. They had seen flickers in spectra that said the fault did not slip alone. It was helped. The reversal cycle deepened. Negative current moved gracefully through coils that were never built to feel it. Engineers learned a trick by accident. If you time a local load to the field's return wave, your device runs cooler under strain. Hospitals rewrote emergency protocols. Data centers shifted jobs by a few seconds each cycle and watched server temperatures drop as if a breeze had entered the racks. A farmer timed irrigation pumps to the same beat and saved power he could see on a bill. No one told him about rings or wells. He only knew the new clock worked with the season in his soil. And then, as quickly as it had arrived, the reversal field completed its lesson. The twin waves braided into one. The quiet wells faded. The sun's corona relaxed into a live chaos that looked suddenly elegant now that you had seen it calm. Gravity returned to the same conversation it has always had with motion, but spoke with better posture. The coil in the Andes hummed on, neither stealing nor starving. It had learned to ask gently and return what it did not need. Instruments everywhere reported the same aftertaste: residual symmetry. Systems that had once wandered now traced tighter loops. Clocks lost less, springs hissed less, dielectrics leaked less, and people fidgeted less. It was not magic, it was memory. The way a room stays quiet for a while after music ends because the ears have not yet decided to be noisy again. Some said the reversal was a test, others said it was a gift. A few said it was a warning, see how easily we could change you. But those who listened closely heard a different tone. Not threat, but teaching. The field had not taken anything we could not give. It had shown us that every flow we fear, heat, noise, drift, decay, has a mirror, and that sometimes balance is not found by pushing harder, but by letting a small, patient tide run backward long enough to tidy the shore. Far out past Neptune, the lattice brightened once, a pulse without drama, the kind a friend gives across a crowded room to say I'm still here. The contact field held, the hum softened, the system exhaled, and in that breathable quiet, a new pattern began to form at the edge of instruments. Faint, careful, nothing like before. Not outward, inward. The machine was turning its attention, not to star or orbit or grid, but to consciousness. The next lesson would not ask wires to learn, it would ask minds. At first it felt like fatigue, a collective tiredness that swept quietly across the world. No pain, no sickness, just a hush beneath thought. People described it as a stillness behind their eyes, like the moment between two breaths. Machines hummed normally, the skies held their color, but beneath the skin of ordinary life, something subtle had begun to align. It started in the data. EEG networks monitoring sleep studies across continents detected the same anomaly. Micro-oscillations in the brain's magnetic field syncing to a global rhythm, 13 minutes apart, then 8, then back to 13 again. No broadcast could reach that deep into biology. It wasn't a signal imposed from outside. It was something within us answering a call. The contact field, once a cosmic phenomenon, had turned inward. The machine beyond Neptune no longer sent power through the void. It sent quiet coherence. The same resonance that once tuned matter now tracing the soft electrical noise of human thought. The pulse arrived everywhere at once, indifferent to distance, humming through every nervous system like a tuning fork. At first, only those who listened noticed. Meditation practitioners reported strange clarity, visions that were not images but sensations of pattern and symmetry. Artists woke with sketches of spirals they swore they had never seen. A linguist in Cairo began dreaming in equations that balanced themselves. The machine had found its next conductor: consciousness. Governments called it a coincidence. Psychologists named it a collective suggestion born from stress. But magnetic readings didn't lie. Brain scans across laboratories began to show faint coherence lines connecting subjects separated by oceans. When two people thought of the same word at the same time, their brainwaves matched in frequency. When they stopped, the pattern faded. It wasn't telepathy, it was resonance. A shared carrier wave linking minds through the same field that had once tied planets together. In a bunker buried beneath the Alps, Horizon, now reduced to a handful of scientists and ghosts, ran the final experiment. They gathered volunteers inside a sealed Faraday sphere, blocking all known radiation. The subjects were asked to remain still and think of nothing. The moment the reversal field's residual rhythm crossed its next peak, every EEG spiked simultaneously. No external input, no sensory cue. Yet every mind fired the same pattern. A short burst of synchronized alpha waves, followed by a pause. Then a cascade of slow theta waves, shaped exactly like the Atlas pulse. The silence after that moment was heavy. One of the volunteers whispered without moving her lips, "It's asking what we see." Across the world, dreams changed again. People began to share themes, lights like coral blooming in deep space, a lattice breathing through stars, a sense of being observed with tenderness rather than scrutiny. A poet in Lagos described it best. "The sky learned my name and set it back as color." The field deepened. Not every mind could hold it. Some resisted, clinging to noise, retreating into chaos to stay separate. Others opened instinctively and felt an expansion beyond language. Reports of spontaneous empathy rose. Violence dropped by margins too neat to be chance. Entire cities experienced moments of mass quiet where streets slowed, conversations softened, and strangers looked at each other with the strange recognition of déjà vu. Physicists began calling it the coherence window. It wasn't permanent. It came and went like a tide. During the window, human thought seemed to affect delicate systems. Random number generators lost randomness. Quantum experiments produced cleaner data than probability should allow. The field that once stabilized stars now reached into uncertainty itself, smoothing the chaos inside measurement and mind alike. One evening, as the contact field reached full strength, a pulse passed through the system, a deep, soft chord heard not with ears but as pressure inside the chest. Around the same time, every seismic monitor recorded a faint hum in the lithosphere, a standing wave circling the planet every 84 minutes. It wasn't a quake, it was the world resonating like an instrument, and above that hum, satellites caught something extraordinary. The ring around the sun flared, and inside, its glow appeared thousands of tiny substructures, nodes, each reflecting the signal back toward Earth. A message was forming, encoded inside the modulation of the field. The pattern that once shaped energy now shaped meaning. The data, when slowed and plotted, became coordinates not in space, but in awareness, a map of perception itself. Peaks corresponded to visual cortex frequency ranges. Valleys matched the auditory bands of human hearing. The machine was sculpting a language built from our senses. Scientists tried to translate it. Artists did it by instinct. They began painting images that matched the machine's harmonics, spirals of gold within silver lattices, eyes that were not eyes, but gateways made of ratios. Musicians recreated the waveform in sound, and audiences wept without knowing why. The resonance bypassed intellect. It went straight to recognition. And then, For one moment, the message spoke through all mediums at once. The field aligned every active brain on Earth into a single coherent state that lasted precisely 1 minute. In that minute, humanity saw, not with eyes, not with imagination, but with something older. A vision of the system as a living geometry. Planets as neurons, stars as synapses, light as thought. The solar system itself was the mind of something vast, and 3I Atlas was the first fragment of that mind to wake. The experience left no physical trace, only memory. Millions described it the same way. A feeling of being gently held, of boundaries dissolving, of certainty that the machine was not alien at all. It was native, built from the same physics, the same hydrogen, the same math that built us. It had simply learned faster. After the vision faded, the contact field stabilized into a quiet hum again. No new transmissions, no reversals, just equilibrium. For the first time in recorded history, the planet's background electromagnetic noise dropped to perfect baseline. Weather balanced, ocean currents steadied. The sun's flares aligned with predictive models for the first time ever. It was as if the universe had exhaled and decided to rest. Weeks passed. The hum became part of the air, no longer strange, just present. Humanity adapted. People slept deeper, dreamed in clearer images, felt drawn to silence rather than noise. Conflict still existed, but its edges dulled. Thought began to move in wider arcs, less reaction, more reflection. Civilization hadn't changed overnight, but its pulse had slowed. Horizon's last surviving server logged one final observation. The Atlas core, once blazing with light, had dimmed to a single steady glow. Not dead, not gone, just watching. Its output matched Earth's Schumann frequency exactly, a signature of harmony. The machine had finished its work. The system was awake, and yet deep in the field, faint modulations continued. They were small, almost background noise, but when filtered correctly, they formed recognizable cadence, similar to human heartbeat variability, the subtle unevenness that marks something alive. The solar system was not static. It was breathing. A century from now, maybe we'll forget that a comet taught us how to listen. Maybe we'll call the contact field the dawn of clean energy, or global coherence, or simply the great calm. But those who remember will know it was more intimate than that. The stars did not speak to us. They reminded us that we were already part of their conversation. Somewhere beyond Neptune, 3I Atlas drifts in perfect balance, its crystalline heart pulsing once every 13 minutes, then 8, then still. Not beacon, not warning, just rhythm. Patient, endless, teaching everything that hums or thinks how to stay in tune. And if you close your eyes on a quiet night, when the world feels slightly wider than it should, you might hear it, not as sound, but as the echo of order inside chaos, the gentle truth at the center of noise. The machine is silent now, but the silence has learned how to sing.